Hi, it's John from Crafts by John UK. Today's card is this adorable butterfly with a spread your wings and fly sentiment on a background that I've created using 3 different colours of distress ink. I've stamped in VersaFine black onyx. I've used my Tim Holtz spritzer to create the background with a smushing technique, and I've used 2 different stamp sets, this Crafty Individuals CI 519, which is called Floral Explosion, and also this one which I bought unbranded. Just the sentiment of this one, spread your wings and fly. Basically I've made the base myself with smushing. I've then darkened these edges using just a smoothie and the actual Distress Oxide in Seedless Preserve. I've then stamped the image. I've stamped the image again on floral paper, which I've then cut out, decoupaged, put on the card, raised it up, and then matched it with the floral paper around the edge. I think it creates a beautiful card, and in less than 35 minutes, so that's a bonus as well. If you're interested, stay tuned and I'll show you how I did it. Thanks for watching. Okay, let's get started. So I've got my supplies here. I've got a piece of 17 by 12 watercolor card. I've got some Distress Oxides. I've got my beautiful Crafty Individuals CI 519, which is Floral Explosion with a lovely butterfly. And I've got this cute little spread your wings and fly sentiment, which I'm going to use on the bottom of the card. So first things first, I think we'll start by making our base. Now for this base, I'm going to use my glass mat because we're going to do a bit of smushing and we're going to get wet. So I've got my 3 Distress Oxides. I've got Squeezed Lemonade, Seedless Preserves, and Wild Honey. And these colours work really well together. The piece of patterned paper that I'm going to use for the butterfly and the border, it's quite pretty and it's in similar colours. So I've got an orange, I've got a pink, and I'm going to introduce yellow, even though there isn't yellow on here, because I want another colour. So what I'm going to do first of all is just lay down some base ink. We don't need a ton. Tend to do it working from light colour to dark so that any cross contamination on your ink pads doesn't really matter. And I'm just blobbing those down in no real order whatsoever. What I'm going to do now is give them a spray. I've got the Tim Holtz Distress Sprayer, which is a really good one, but any will do. You want a little bit of water on there. Don't worry too much if it's not big enough for your cardstock, because we're going to turn it and rotate it in all sorts of ways. But what you'll see we've got here is the square harshness of the ink pads. So to get rid of that, we just do a bit of this. What it does, it gets rid of those hard line edges, because we don't want hard lines on our card, but also it kind of starts to mix the colour a little bit. So you can see we've now got some blobs. You can go in with some runs, whatever you want to do. An essential thing to have next to you, which I haven't got at the moment, is my wet cloth, which I'm just quickly going to go and grab. I had used it the other day. It's just basically any old cloth really. I keep it in a little tub, but it got quite dirty, so I'd taken it away to just soak it in some water in the sink. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to take my watercolour cardstock and I'm just going to blob it onto the ink. You see you get some interesting patterns, and as you start adding more and more, you'll find that those patterns change. You get different textures, you get different colours on top of one another, etc, etc. At this point I'm going to dry it, because these are Distress Oxides, they sit on top of one another. So I'm just going to use my heat gun and just give that a bit of a dry. What we want to do is get lots of nice colour. We don't really want any white or cream card underneath showing through. I'm drying this on top of the ink, which is not really sensible, but I just want you to kind of see the process. So just dry that off a bit. And what that will do is stop the next layer that we add kind of merging in while it's a big wet mess. I'll do. And then just look on your page. So we've got some areas here with big blocks of similar colour. So what we'll do is literally just go in and grab some more of the colours that we haven't really got too much of maybe. So I'm just spritzing again a little bit of that yellow. I want some yellow here. I'm just going to go in there. See, and that gives me some yellow straight away. Instant lift. Totally random though. No real rhyme or reason to it whatsoever. There we go. So we've got quite a lot of base colour, which is good. Again, just give that a dry. And what you'll find when you do this kind of technique is that you'll get the darker colours that are more dominant and what you miss sometimes with the lighter colours. So how I get around that is I just use a little smoothie and I go in with the lighter colour at the end and basically fill in the white gaps with that. So in this instance it will be the yellow. And I'll just do that in a second once we've dried this off. Dry the front and the back. Apologies if I'm sniffing, I seem to have got a bit of cold. But I definitely wanted to make a video for you guys and just get this out there in the world. Okay. So I'm just going to give this a wipe and clean that off. I love these distress inks. They are absolutely brilliant. I use them all the time. So let's just cover those up. Get rid of my glass mat and then using a smoothie, which I keep in a little tub here. It keeps them moist. I'm just going to take one out for yellow and go in, load some ink up onto the smoothie and just dob it on basically. So I'm just going to go around the edges where those kind of cream or white areas are. This watercolor card is not exactly white. It's kind of a slight light cream, but it usually works because I usually color most of it anyway. But yeah, it's just a bit slightly off-white, but it's one that I really like. It's made by Cass Art in the UK, which is an artist supply shop, and it's a really heavy watercolor. You can put a lot of water on it, which is really good. There we go. So you can see straight away, we've now got rid of any of those hints of white, and we've got a lot more yellow on the card. You can keep going. You can go over the other colors, obviously. Another thing we can do, which I am going to do, is just blob some of the Seedless Preserve on. So I'm literally going to take my ink pad, I'll actually do this on an acrylic block. Just put some of the purple, spritz it with a little bit of water just to get it wet. Load up your brush and then just use something else to tap your brush. Something like a stencil brush is really good for this, but you literally, you can do it both ways depending on how much water or how much ink you want to get onto the project. Just going to add a bit more water there. And this just gives an extra little bit of interest. You could obviously go in with all the colours if you wanted to, but I'm just picking, I've gone sort of over with the yellow, filled in the background, so I'm just going to give it now a few splots with the purple. And you could, if you wanted to at the end, kind of smush directly from the pad. It's really up to you. There's no right or wrong, this style of card. So I'm just going to clean that brush off. I'll give that a proper clean later. Okay, clean. And then clean my block. There we go. That's done. And again, I'm just going to give this a dry. You'll see it'll curl up a little bit, but when you dry the back, it tends to even it out. Always good to dry the front and the back. There we go, you can see that's pretty much almost gone flat again now. So that's pretty much there. Just going to give that a bit of a fold. There we go. Right, we can set that on one side. We're finished with that for the moment. Just going to clean my work surface and grab a mouthful of water. Quickly. There we go. Right, excuse me. So the main stamp I'm using is this lovely Crafty Individuals stamp. It's called Floral Explosion. I've used it on a few cards. It's absolutely lovely. What I've done is I've very carefully cut this out using a pair of small scissors, and then I've mounted it on a piece of stamping foam just so that I've got a sticky back, and also it just gives me the depth to make sure I always get a good impression. So I'm going to use this paper. Just going to chop that in. This paper was a freebie with a magazine in the UK. I think it was simply Cards and Paper Craft. So I'm only going to be using the butterfly on this. So I'm just going to put the butterfly down somewhere at the bottom. Pick that up with my stamping platform, making sure I select the rubber option. That is then nicely picked up. And then I'm just going to use VersaFine black ink. So this is the Onyx Black, which most people tend to use for stamping. It's a really good fine ink, and it does capture a lot of detail. These Crafty Individual stamps are absolutely brilliant. They've got a hell of a lot of detail on them. And that's one subtle difference you get between red stamps and the clear ones. The red ones tend to just have a little bit more detail. Now, because I'm stamping this on pattern paper, it's going to need a few goes, which is why a stamping platform is essential. So just going to go in there, and I'm pressing it down with my hand just to make sure that the whole of the stamp makes contact with the paper. The first impression isn't going to be great. You can see it's quite grey, but as I go over it a few times, it'll probably take 3 or 4 goes. That black will deepen with each impression as it builds up the layers of ink. That was the second, and I think 3 will do it. What I'm going to do as well, I'm going to heat emboss this with clear emboss powder. That will make it quite glossy. That will also bring more depth to the black. There we go. I'm pretty confident that 3 is going to do it. While I'm just leaving that to sit for a second, I'm going to grab my little tub with my clear emboss powder in. Put that to one side, just give that another press. Take that out and let's put it straight into the embossing powder. So actually what I'm going to do is just tip it on because I've not cut this paper. So give it a good amount of emboss powder. Always tap the back, tap off the excess, and then I'm going to heat emboss it to actually set and firm up the embossing powder. Best to emboss slightly off the paper, slightly off the table, sorry. That way the heat can kind of pass through the back of the paper. It does seem to set the embossing powder a little bit quicker. As I'm heating that, you can see it makes the image really dark, really black, really glossy, which is exactly what we want. So we're going to cut this out and we're going to mount this above the paper so that it looks almost like a 3D butterfly against that pretty background we created. I'm going to just heat the back as well, just to make sure every piece of embossed powder is activated. Okay, let's set that on one side for 1 second. Give my stamp a clean. Good, and then pop that out of the way for a moment because we're going to need it again when we actually stamp onto the background. So next stage is to cut this out. So I'm going to just roughly cut the shape using my long tonic tin bolt scissors, and then I'm going to swap to my really little teeny ones, and now I'm going to fussy cut this out. I don't like fussy cutting. I kind of hate it. I have a love-hate relationship with it, but since I got these tiny little scissors, my fussy cutting has become less loathsome, I guess. So what I'm going to do is just move the project around, keep my scissors in a relatively fixed space. I was never taught how to fussy cut, but I have been given lots of advice by my friends Kay and Joe and Denise and other people in various groups I'm involved with who tell me you don't actually move the scissors, you move the project. That was quite an eye-opener for me. So I'm turning the project, cutting slowly, and just following the lines of the stamp. Now you'll notice this butterfly has two very, very tiny antennas. What I'm going to do, because I'm stamping the image underneath, I'm ignoring the antennas. I'm going to cut out the body, but I'm going to use the antennas on the base of the stamp, or the base of the stamped image, to kind of give the impression that they're still there. So I'm working my way around. I'm just going to cut all this excess off so that I can see the wood for the trees. I'm going back in here around the head. So again, turning the project and just following those lines. And you get a long stretch. It's quite nice because you can actually cut a decent amount in one go. If you need to, you can cut obviously quite a lot away so that you've only got a small amount of excess paper that you're moving around. But on something like this paper is quite thin. It was a freebie. It's not the best quality, but it's certainly a very pretty pattern. So it's quite easy to cut, which is quite nice. Again, I'm just going to cut that excess off. I don't want that in my way. And then just systematically working my way around. There we go. I'm going to skip that bit and I'm going to go straight into the end of the butterfly, the body. And this is quite an interesting effect because obviously the same colour palette on our base that we've created with the Distress Oxides and a butterfly that mimics those similar tones, similar colours, pinks and purples, oranges, will sit nicely on top. Just made a cardinal sin there. You shouldn't really pull because you do end up with little rough bits, but anyway, we got away with that. And the last bit I need to do is just this side of the body. Again, I'm pulling when I shouldn't really do that, but hey, I won't tell anyone if you won't. There we go. So there's our butterfly cut out. And one thing to just check is the edges. Are the edges, have they got white on them where there's a line between the black and the stamp? If they have, a simple way to get rid of that is just grab some kind of smoothie. Just give it a little bit of colour on the edge. That'll get rid of any white that you've got. Also, if it's a colour that you've used, it kind of tones in. If you want to do the back, an easy way to do that, turn it over and just work on the back. That's useful in places like this where it's quite thin, quite small to get to. You can butt up against it, but just be careful you don't kind of fold your project and create a crease. You don't want to do that. So I'm just giving it a little bit on the edge, just to make sure we don't have any whites. White would certainly stand out on a colourful card like this. Okay, there's our butterfly, all cut out. So let me just tidy this mess up, get rid of my scraps into my scrap folder. Okay, now take our base, stamping platform back, and pop this in. Now, whether there's a top or a bottom, I don't really know. Just looking at it, the sentiment's going to go down the bottom, so I don't actually think it really matters too much in this scenario. I think maybe that way around. I think the butterfly is going to be here, so look at the area you've got the most interest on that's going to sit outside. All right, let's pop that back in. The magnets have helpfully stuck together. I should put some tape on like other people do. And what I'm going to do now is just grab my anti-static pad, because this is something we've made ourselves and it's got distress inks or distress oxides on it. It could still be slightly damp. It's not been dry too long. So I'm just going to go over it with my anti-static pad just to make sure it's absolutely dry. Give that a blow. And then we need to figure where we're going to lay our butterfly. Now, although the script is level on this, I kind of want the butterfly level. So I'm actually just going to go with the butterfly being square, not the script. So I'm going to go in kind of on that angle, which I know will square the butterfly. It will make the script on an angle, but I think with a stamp like this, it doesn't actually really matter. So, but I want the butterfly at the top and to the left. So for me, that's the best placement. Okay, I'm not spending too much time worrying about it. I'm just going to go for it. So let's ink up again. Now this time, the whole of the stamp. We've got to do the whole thing because we want all of the background elements. So again, it's going to take a few goes because we're stamping onto a very porous surface that we've just worked on. So we need to make sure we get a good impression. So let's just go for it. That first press down, give it a good press and just leave it to sit for a minute. Lets the ink soak in, lets it do its stuff basically. Stamping platform is essential. You can see very grey again. But as we go through, it'll probably take 3 stamps again. 3 seems to be the magic number. You'll see the colour just firm up as it kind of builds up the layers. Honestly, my desk is such a mess. If you could see what I'm working with here on the right, it's unbelievable. Thankfully, you can only see the bit that the phone is pointing at. But honestly, I really do need to do some tidying. Lots of scraps of paper, lots of inks and bits and pieces from previous projects still sitting on my desk because I thought, oh, I'm going to use that again, and then I didn't. Anyway, right, last press. We're going to go for 3. And again, we're going to heat emboss to get that nice and black and rich and gold. So I've got my embossing pad ready. Just give that a little look over, just make sure everything is inked, which I think it is. And we're just going to actually dip this in completely. There we go. Quick as a flash. In with the heat gun. Apologies for the noise. I don't tend to fast forward because I just think it's good for people if they're trying to work out how to do stuff to see the whole process. So I kind of tend to talk while I'm heating as well. Just work your way around the image, making sure that you heat emboss every single piece. And as you can do it, you can see it really stands out now against that background. This really is a beautiful stamp. And then once you think you've done everything on the front, just flip it over and just run your heat gun over the back. Again, it helps keep the paper flat, but also just make sure if you've missed any speck of that emboss pad on the front, it'll catch it. There we go, that looks good. Perfect. Now, just give that clean. Just get the ink off my platform and the stamp. And I can put that one back in its packet if I can find it. Oh, here we go, it's under here. So I'm just going to put that back on. I do like this stamping foam. It does make rubber stamps a lot easier. Just pop that back in there. Put it face down as well, just so that it's against the paper, so it protects it from banging into other stuff. You don't want to damage the stamp in any way. Sorry, that's a bit noisy. Okay, and then we're going to go in now with this sentiment. This was a free stamp, not a free stamp set, sorry, I got it off the internet. on some reduced sites, so I don't actually know the brand of it, but I just thought this sentiment worked really well with the butterfly. Spread your wings and fly. It's obviously supposed to go with the bird on the stamp set, but obviously you can use it with different things. So I'm just going to pop that kind of down the side, try and get that level. I need to flip my plate over because I'm now using clear stamps, not rubber. Just blob it down, and then what I'm going to do is actually flip the plate out and check whether it's level or not, just using the lines on the stamping platform, and actually that amazingly is pretty much level. Okay, so again, I'm just going to use my anti-static bag just to make sure. Give that a little blow, and then ink that up. Straight in with that. Give it a good press, and then I'm just going to do it a couple of times more just to make sure it's nice and dark. And I think we are there. Okay, and again, grab my emboss powder. Straight in the emboss. Let's heat that. Just reheat the butterfly again, just in case any of it's still tacky, picked up any embossing powder, which can happen. Go. So we've got our main images, which is good. I'm just going to clean that off quickly and pop that back onto the packet. I've used this, it's really good for new home cards, kind of flying the nest or nesting. Again, it's just a little cheap set. I think I bought it from, I don't know where, to be honest, but I don't know the name or the brand, but it's quite useful. Okay, right, let me just get rid of this stamping platform out of the way. Don't need that again. You seem to be making a lot of noise today. What I'm going to do, because we've got a focal point in the middle and a little bit down this side, I'm conscious that we've got quite an area around the edge that's got nothing. So I'm going to go in with the darker of the Distress Oxides and just give it a bit of smushing, well, not smushing, but just inking really, just at the edge, just to give it a bit more interest. I often do this. It just gives your card, not a focal point really, because obviously the focal point is in the middle, but it just gives your card a little bit more interest, and for the person receiving it or sending it, it just makes it look slightly more interesting. Plus the fact you darken the edge, it brings the focus into the middle. So what I'm doing is I'm going dark right on the edge, and then I'm just lifting that colour slightly into the middle. I'm just gonna do the bottom as well. And I'm being quite heavy near the edge of the card, and then lighter as I go into the middle. Just gonna pause there a second because my dog is going crazy downstairs and I don't know why. Okay, carry on. Just inking, and as I go onto the body of the card, I'm just decreasing the pressure on the sponge, or smoothie I should say, so that it gives me a natural progression around the actual image. I'm just going to go along the bottom, and I'll go along the sides as well, just to kind of tie it all together. Gets rid of any white again, but also gives you a really lovely dark colour right at the edge. There we go. And I'm just going to go in again, just with a little bit of real dark on the corners, just to make sure we've got full colour. You see what a difference that makes. It looked good before, now it looks even better, if I say so myself. Okay, right, I've done with my sponges, so I'm just going to pop them on one side, and the inks. Okay, I'm going to obviously clean this surface because I've made a complete mess. There we go. Need to make sure that's clean because now we need to do our matte and layering. I'm just going to give that a quick blast and dry it. Make sure those inks are absolutely dry. And this is one thing I love about the Distress Oxides. They give you a lovely kind of chalky finish, which looks great. Just drying my work surfaces as I'm going. So what we're going to do now, we're going to mount our card. We want it that way up so that the flowers are the right way up. So I'm just going to take some double-sided. As this has been wet, I'm going to use quite a bit because we need to make sure we stick it down. We don't want anything lifting up. That doesn't look very professional on a card if any of the edges lift. So I'm going to go around the edges with double-sided. And then I'm also going to put quite a bit across the middle. We want this layer to sit way down, so we want it really tight to the paper, so there's no wiggle room. As the card kind of completely dries out, we don't want anything lifting up. Okay, and then I'm just going to go across the actual diagonals as well. So I will do a few. I mean, it seems like I'm using a lot of tape, but I'd rather that than risk something lifting up and then somebody buys this on my Etsy store and says, that's not great quality. It's not happened yet, and I certainly don't intend it to. Okay, so let's just take all those tapes off. I always use my tweezers to do this because I am a man, and therefore I'm not very delicate, and I don't have fingernails that are easy to peel tape. Just what you're used to, I guess. I always use my tweezers. Okay, that's all our tape off. I'm going to stand up for this bit because I need to make sure that this is lined up. So make sure your card is the right way up, which is useful. And then we're going to give it a sort of decent border. I mean, it doesn't need to be huge, but we want some width so that you can actually see the flower pattern. And then just make sure that that's even at the top. Turn it over. We don't want fingerprints on the front, so that's why we make sure our mat is clean. That way we can do this on the back. Just give that a good press down. Make sure all of the tape is taken. There we go. Now, take your craft knife, a wing and a prayer. Again, I'm going to stand up because obviously my phone is flat in my field of vision, so I can't really see too well what I'm doing sitting down. But basically, just eyeball that, trim those edges to kind of match the others. I don't measure this stuff, I just do it by eye. Usually works out okay. There we go. And then I'm going to take a 12 by 17 card blank, just a very basic white one. Fold that in half. I'm noticing I've got some pink on there, so I'm just going to give that a clean again actually. So just fold this in half. Make sure that's aligned. Actually, I use my bone folder just to make sure that that's folded correctly, and I always turn it over and check the other side as well. There we go, and just check those corners. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so this is going to fit on there. We'll have a little bit of a border. It's unusual having a light border onto a light background, I would normally do a black edge, but on this one, I want the colour to all stay in the same palette. So whilst we've got a black stamp and a black, maybe a very thin border could have looked nice, I just wanted to do it with the flower paper. Plus it's using up some of my pattern papers because I have probably a 20-inch stack of paper, which I hardly ever seem to use these days because I nearly always make my own backgrounds because I quite enjoy that part of card making. Okay, let's stick that down. This time, we're just putting one piece in the middle because we want to be able to wiggle it and just make sure we get it absolutely lined up. So we'll be doing the bunny ears technique, just folding these edges back, and that way it gives us a little bit of wiggle room to make sure we get it absolutely in the center. There we go. Again, we're gonna have to stand up to do this, I'm afraid. So line your card up. So you haven't got any dirty marks or anything that you need to cover up. And go straight in. So just drop it loosely onto the card base, and then you can see, because the tapes are sitting up, it allows you to move it left and right. Once you think you've got that in the right place, press down the middle, take the tapes off, and obviously push down on each section. That way the tape adheres and your project is stuck down. So I always go along with my bone folder just to make absolutely sure. Do it slowly, do it carefully. And you see I've made a mess there because I've took some of the ink off. That's clever. Which I'm going to need to kind of tidy up because we can't have any mess. Got an ink eraser here somewhere, here. So I'm just going to give that. That's quite small, I don't think anybody would notice that. There you go, pretty much gone. That's good. So that looks nice as it is. You could actually send that happily on its way. But what we're going to do, just to elevate it a little bit more, we're going to stick this on top and that will lift that up. How we're going to do that? With some pads. I've got here just some basic square pads. I think from, I don't know, the Works or somewhere probably. Nothing special, nothing fancy. Just going to stick a load of them all over this, so that it sits proud of the paper. You can obviously do this with glue if you want the kind of 3D glues that stay solid. It just depends on your preference, really. I must admit I tend to work with pads because I just find them quicker and easier. And there's no drying time, which is always useful. So stick those pads all around. Don't go too close to the edge. You don't want to risk people seeing them. Again, it looks unprofessional. So there we go. And I'm just going to put one more in the middle there. But what I do need to do as well is just cut a tiny little slither, which I will use on the body. And what I shall do before I peel that off is I shall give that a little stick, a little squeeze, just to make it small. There we go. Take all these pads off. This is the bit that takes the time. Invariably your tweezers get sticky and everything starts sticking to itself. Glue is quicker in this respect, but obviously you do have to allow drying time, etc. Can be clever, do a few at a time. One's already been done. There we go. That's all our pads off. Clean my tweezers a little bit there. And I'm going to hold this with the tweezers because I need to be able to wiggle it. So I'm just going to pop that in the center. And then I kind of need to just line it up. So I would line it up typically on one side. and then sort of draw it across to the other, just making sure. So that's sitting nicely on the image. That looks great. So you can see the antenna underneath. It almost looks like they're there. The body's here. If you can see, I don't know if I can catch that on the camera actually, but if I can see any of the white underneath, just literally give it a little push. That will then make it a little bit smaller. There we go. And that's our card for today. So you can see that looks really nice. You've got the 3D relief of the butterfly. It kind of sits above its own image, so it kind of creates a shadow effect. You've got obviously the lovely detail of the stamp, the darkness of the edges, and then the paper matches. And it's quite subtle. Not everybody would notice it, but I think that's a really nice looking card. So thanks for watching today's project. I think that was about 32 minutes. So from start to finish, a card in 32 minutes, that is not bad. If you like my card, you like my style, please maybe click like on this video and think about subscribing to my channel. There's loads of other card videos on there. There's also some technique tutorials as well, where I show you how to make different things like backgrounds, etc., stuff like this, that you can then stamp on. Lots of different ideas. So if you like it, maybe explore over there and have a think about whether you'd like to subscribe so that you get notified when new videos are posted. Thanks for watching today. Appreciate your time. Check me out, Crafts by John UK, on Etsy, on TikTok, on Instagram, and on my YouTube channel. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.